They looked at the Cessna A-37 Dragonfly and saw a toy. A tiny trainer jet with a cute nickname. The kind of plane nobody thought belonged anywhere near a real war. And then that toy jet went out and flew just under 70,000 combat missions. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how a converted trainer became one of the hardest working attack aircraft of its era. If you appreciate this type of content, gently tap that like button. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about the A-37. It did not start life as a warplane. It started life as a school desk with wings. Its ancestor was the Cessna A-37, a little twin-engine trainer the US Air Force used to teach brand new pilots how to fly. It was so small and it made such a ridiculous ear-splitting shriek that the men who flew it gave it a nickname that tells you everything: the 6,000-pound dog whistle. This was not a machine anyone associated with war. This was the thing you soloed in after 6 hours, before you graduated to the real, grown-up jets. So when the Air Force went looking for a light attack aircraft for Vietnam, and someone pointed at the cute little trainer and said, "What about that one?" You can imagine how that went down with the fighter pilots flying supersonic Super Sabres and Phantoms. They were about to send the flight school runabout to war, and the joke was about to be on them. To be fair, the Air Force didn't do this for a laugh. It had a real problem. The war in Vietnam wasn't the kind of war the big, fast, beautiful jets were built for. The F-4 Phantom, the F-100 Super Sabre, the F-105 Thunder Chief. These were magnificent machines, built to go supersonic and fight other jets or drop big loads on big targets. But a lot of the actual fighting on the ground was small, close, and messy. Troops in the trees calling for help against an enemy just a stone's throw away. And a supersonic fighter screaming overhead at hundreds of miles an hour is a terrible tool for that job. It's too fast to see the target, too fast to be accurate, and one miss lands on your own guys. The Air Force had been leaning on the old propeller-driven Sky Raider for this: slow, steady, accurate. But they were running out of them. So they needed something slow enough to be precise, tough enough to take fire, cheap enough to build in numbers, and simple enough to hand to Allied pilots too. And it turned out the toy was perfect, because that little trainer had two things the big fighters didn't. It could fly slow, and it could turn on a dime down low in the weeds, exactly where this war was actually being fought. So they bulked it up. Bigger engines, roughly double the power, a minigun in the nose, hardpoints under the wings for bombs, rockets, and napalm. They took the school desk and they bolted teeth onto it, and they called the attack version the A-37 Dragonfly, though everyone, of course, just called it the Super Tweet. Quick break: if you're enjoying this, do me a favor and like and subscribe for more stories like this one. It genuinely helps the channel, and it means you won't miss the next aircraft. Now, back to the Dragonfly. Because carrying weapons is one thing, surviving with them is another. Then they crated up a batch, shipped them to Vietnam, and told them to prove it. The trial was called Operation Combat Dragon, and it started in 1967. And here's how confident everyone was in this little jet. It was one of the only aircraft in history sent to war itself as its test program. Most planes get years of careful testing back home before they ever see combat. The Super Tweet skipped all that. Its final exam was live fire over enemy territory from day one. It passed, spectacularly. Because it could slow right down and get low, the A-37 could put its bombs and rockets exactly where they needed to go, inside a radius of just a few dozen feet, again and again. And that accuracy made it the most beautiful sight in the sky for the men on the ground. There's a story from the War of a Forward Air Controller, one of the guys on the ground marking targets, who'd been working with fast fighters that kept missing. When the A-37s showed up to take over, he keyed his radio, forgetting it was on an open channel, and as one controller put it, more or less blurted out, "Thank God, now I've got somebody who can actually hit the target. That's the reputation this thing earned." The toy hit what the expensive jets couldn't. And the part that should not be possible, it barely got shot down. Everyone assumed a slow, low-flying aircraft would be a sitting duck, easy meat for enemy gunners. It wasn't. Over the entire first phase, the first 3,000 combat missions, not a single A-37 was lost to enemy fire. Not one. A little trainer flying low and slow into the teeth of the ground war, and the enemy simply couldn't hit it, because in a dive, it was a tiny, nimble, almost impossible target. One of the pilots put it perfectly. He said he climbed in, flew his first mission, got shot at, and immediately realized, they can't hit me. So the toy stopped being a joke and started being indispensable. The A-37 just worked, all the time. Close air support, escorting helicopters, night missions hunting for the enemy, marking targets. Whatever the war needed, the Super Tweet did it, over and over, at a pace the glamorous fighters couldn't match. It was cheap to fly, easy to maintain, and always available. Squadrons were flying 1,000 missions a month. And that's how a converted trainer racked up a number that still sounds made up. By the Air Force's own count, from 1967 to 1974, the A-37 flew 68,471 combat missions. And a lot of the pilots who were there think even that official number is low, given how relentlessly they were flying, which is why you'll sometimes see far bigger figures quoted for the wider air war. Either way, it's staggering. This was one of the hardest working aircraft of the entire conflict, and almost nobody remembers its name because it never got the movie, never got the glory, never got the girl. It just showed up every single day and did the job the expensive jets couldn't. The little dog whistle had become one of the busiest warplanes in Vietnam. And then the A-37 story takes a genuinely strange turn. As America withdrew, it handed its A-37s over to the South Vietnamese Air Force to carry on the fight. But when the South fell in 1975, dozens of these little jets, roughly 90 odd of them, were captured intact by the North Vietnamese. So the toy jet America built to fight the North ended up being flown by the North. In fact, years later, when Vietnam invaded Cambodia, those very same former American A-37s flew a huge share of the ground attack missions. The same airframes, now on the other side, still working, still fighting. That's the Super Tweet all over. Too useful to retire, too tough to kill, too practical to care whose flag was painted on it. And it didn't stop there. Decades after it was built, the A-37 was still flying combat and patrol missions for air forces across Central and South America, a 1960s converted trainer, soldiering on into the 21st century, long after most of the glamorous jets it served alongside were in museums. So here's what the Super Tweet really is. Every other aircraft gets remembered for being the biggest, the fastest, the deadliest. The A-37 gets remembered, by the few who remember it at all, for something less glamorous and honestly more impressive. It just worked. They took a flight school trainer that everyone dismissed as a toy, bolted a gun to it, sent it to war as its own test program, and it went out and flew tens of thousands of missions, hit targets the million-dollar fighters kept missing, and barely let the enemy lay a glove on it. The expensive jets got the headlines. The toy got the job done. And it kept getting it done for the better part of half a century, on both sides of a war, on two continents, long after everyone stopped paying attention. Not bad for a 6,000-pound dog whistle. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe, because we've got a lot more forgotten legends to get to. And tell me down in the comments what other underrated aircraft deserve their moment. We'll see you next time.